Okay, coercive bureaucracy in action at the US Post Office. If we want to see coercive bureaucracy in action, there are fabulously horrifying examples at the US Postal Service. A close friend, Poseidon, Fred Poseidon, he worked for the post office as a post carrier since 1997. He loves being outdoor and enjoys parking his mail truck in a neighborhood and walking around. He passed up opportunity to be promoted to management to continue the outdoor work he loves. Fred was never very political and did not have strong opinions, one way or the other, about postal union for city mall carriers. The National Association of Letter Carriers. Okay. However, after repeated frustrations with management, he got involved with the union and was elected to be a representative and eventually became vice president of the local. One of his pet peeves is the way the USPS handled standard work. The post office first botched the introduction of standard work in the 1970s in what became known as the Kokomo Plan, named after the town in Indiana where it was tested. In order to try to develop a faster, simple way to develop standard work for jobs with standard timings, in the 1974, the USPS timed routine tasks done by carriers, such as reaching to pick up a package and placing it in a mailbox. Based on these times, the Postal Service constructed jobs under the assumptions that the sum of the individual tasks would accurately reflect the time for the job, known as predetermined time standards. The USPS could use these times to construct daily routines and assess the performance of carriers against the standard times. It quickly became apparent to the union that these times were anything but accurate reflections of reality, and the union successfully fought the system. The union saw that there was far too much variations in actual routes to predict the time it should take using standard time. For example, letter mails to household is first put in sequence by machines, and the numbering of houses is straightforward with few errors. On a business route, you have the street address and then many different suites, and the mail gets jumbled in the delivery sequence as the carrier walks from suit to suit, finding the right mail. If you study the actual situation, it will be clear that additional time is needed for these business deliveries, but this was not reflected in the standard times. There are thousands of variations on issues like these that make standard times guesses at best. In 1976, the post office proposed to take the standards nationwide, and this almost resulted in a nationwide strike. The experiment was scrapped. Fred's personal experience with standard work was in a letter wave in 2004, when a supervisor decided to change the delivery sequence of his route. There's an official route adjustment process in which a management representative works with a carrier throughout the day and records data on a standard chart for points from point to point. Fred's direct supervisor worked with Fred and also observed him covertly and decided he could make Fred's route more efficient. Changes were made with no input from Fred. On the first day of working the new route, it was clear to Fred that what his supervisor was proposing would take an extra 15 to 20 minutes. Let's consider one part of the supervisor's ideas for improvement, probably the worst part. Before the redesign, Fred specified sequence for one part of the route, which was park, then walk sequentially on one side of the street, delivering to each house. For example, the even number 246 and then continue walking in a circle to get to the odd houses 135 and then back to his truck. In this particular area, one house was separated by about 250 feet from the other houses. So Fred would complete the circle and then get in his truck and drove to that house to deliver the mail. His supervisor changed the working sequence so Fred was zigzagging back and forth doing houses in exact order 1, 2, 3, etc. Fred could only guess that his purpose was to eliminate one dismount delivery, getting back to the truck to the isolated house. If you look at the diagram of movement patterns, it is immediately obvious that the original pattern is more efficient than the new pattern, which involved wasteful zigzagging back and forth and then walking all the way to the isolated house and returning past houses that were already served. From a lean management perspective, the supervisor had taken a pretty efficient process and inserted a lot of wasted travels into it. As Fred expected, the supervisor's inefficient changes added 15 to 20 minutes a day, which turned into overtime pay for 1 year. Fred appreciated the extra money but did not think this benefited the post office in any way or the customers, who might end up paying more for postage to cover extra costs of poor decision. Fred decided to do the right thing and protest to the boss, explaining it added extra time, but the supervisor stuck to his guns. He seemed more determined to be right than to develop an efficient route. It was incidents like this that motivated Fred to become active in the union to stop ill-advised management behavior harmful to the workers, customers, and the USPS. After 1 year of the overtime, the region got a new postmaster and decided to spend a day working with Fred. Highly unusual in the coercive bureaucracy of the US Post Office. As they were approaching the changes with the zigzag route, Fred said to the postmaster, "At first I was concerned about spending the day with you, and then I realized this is a great opportunity to show you what one of your supervisors did." Fred soon started the zigzags and the postmaster asked, "Why are you doing that?" Fred said, "You have to ask your supervisor. He's the one who made these changes." The supervisor was not around much longer after that. We should note that bureaucracies aren't always potent enough to be coercive. I remember working as a cooperative education student in the quality department of a company that built nuclear power plants. What we did was to write procedures, thousands of procedures and addenda. Presumably, this would guide the design and building of the power plant, but our real customers was the Nuclear Regulator Commission. We wanted to pass the commission's audit. I suspect the people they were the only ones who actually read these thousands of ACAN procedures with headings and subheadings and citations. I never saw the site of a nuclear plant, never went to the Gemba, but I wrote great procedures. It is possible, more accurate to call this paper bureaucracy rather than coercive bureaucracy. I doubt many people were coerced by this procedure manually. What was more concerning is that they were largely invisible to the people doing the work. So this is your stop for our reading this morning. Okay, talking about coercive bureaucracy in action at the US Post Office. An example of that would be the postmaster who introduced a standard that was not working. Rather, it was taking an extra 10 to 20 minutes to actually deliver mails to houses, and also costing the company a lot and also making the customers dissatisfied. So enabling bureaucracy is far more better than coercive bureaucracy, just like it's told us yesterday, coercive versus enabling bureaucracy, where enabling bureaucracy is about standards and improvements, where you see where there's visible changes and efficient changes everywhere in an organization. Tomorrow we'll look at standards in enabling bureaucracy, and we'll also see the differences between a coercive bureaucracy and a standard bureaucracy. Thank you.